The following is a production of NET Connects.
Many senior and vulnerable Nebraskans are faced with the challenges of protecting themselves and their loved ones from the threat of fraud, abuse, and financial exploitation. To provide protection for vulnerable and older adults, the Older Americans Act and the Adult Protective Services state statutes were established. In today's program, you'll hear from experts who will discuss the impact of financial exploitation on vulnerable and older Nebraskans. Common frauds and scams in Nebraska will be discussed, with tips on how to protect yourself from being victimized. You'll learn how to stop unwanted mail and how to place a security freeze on your credit history for a minimal cost. You'll also learn that filing a consumer complaint and reporting scams is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Law enforcement will provide an overview of case investigations and how they work with other agencies, such as the Department of Health and Human Services Adult Protective Services Office, during their investigation of cases in the court system. A medical expert will discuss how to spot symptoms of conditions such as dementia, and how diminished capacity increases a person's vulnerability for financial exploitation. Lastly, you'll hear from a legal expert who will review the roles and responsibilities of the agents of power of attorney. You'll gain insight into important questions such as what are some underlying financial exploitation issues that surface when doing powers of attorney, and what are some family dynamics that come into play. Now let's hear from our experts.
Hello, I'm Jim Hegarty, President of your Regional Better Business Bureau. I'm here today to talk to you about what we would like to refer to as the evolution of scams over the past couple of decades. Unfortunately, over my 25-year career at the Better Business Bureau, I'd like to be able to tell you that we've seen a dramatic curtailment in the sorts of schemes and scams that victimize vulnerable Americans, but unfortunately, it's gone the opposite way. We've seen exponential growth in scams that particularly impact the senior marketplace. A scam that many of you are likely familiar with or have read our warnings about would be what we refer to as a foreign lottery scam. This could either be a call to your home from someone that's telling you that they're with the Reader's Digest sweepstakes or Good Housekeeping, whoever it might be, telling you that you are a finalist or perhaps a winner in $1 million lottery and that there is going to be some fees involved in order for you to collect your prize or have a courier deliver that prize to you. Many of these schemes are advanced through the mail. We receive reports from seniors that receive notifications regularly that they're a finalist or that they've won millions of dollars, and I've brought some examples of how pervasive this mail can be for just one individual from a retirement community here in Lincoln that brought us all of the mail that they've received over maybe a period of 90 to 120 days. It's pretty eye-popping. So these are the stacks. You can see that they are, very well organized. They have a very official look to them. And in almost 9 out of 10 cases, these are notifications that they are either a finalist or that they have won a grand prize in a lottery. Seniors that fall for this can get ensnared into traps that can be extremely costly. We have one example here of a couple that believed that they were a finalist and a winner of $1 million prize. Over about a 2-year period of time, this couple wire transferred over $160,000 to scammers, believing that they were going to eventually receive their prize. These are all of the wire transfers that just this couple sent over that period of time. Very frightening, very heartbreaking. So perhaps you wouldn't be someone that would believe that you've won a foreign prize, but maybe you would believe a pop-up on your screen as you're online interacting, maybe on Facebook with your grandchildren or your children, and you see a pop-up that there's a virus that's been detected on your computer and you need to click on it in order to receive the repair information that you need to get it off. By doing that, you may be clicking on malware that can enter your system and look for sensitive sensitive information, account information, passwords, etc. Or you may get a call from someone claiming to be with Microsoft, telling you that a virus has been detected on your system and they need remote access in order to remove it. By providing that remote access, you're allowing a foreigner to get into your system. Again, look for sensitive information, bank accounts, passwords, the kinds of things that can be very harmful. And in many cases, they will tell you that they can repair your system, but it's going to cost you $100, $200, which of course you'll have to pay for with a credit card. And now the bad guys have got your credit card information, so it doesn't end. Or maybe you receive a call from someone that is just saying, "Can you hear me?" We have had a scam that has emerged over the last 6 or 7 months, and it's very bizarre, but these are scam artists that are trying to just get individuals to say the word yes, and then they will later connect that to something that they claim that you've agreed to and owe for. So we're not sure how all of that will evolve, but we do know that if you receive a call from anybody that is trying to get you to say the word yes, you need to simply hang up. In all of these cases, we want you to reach out to the BBB Senior Line. Give the BBB an opportunity to help you sort out whether or not the offer that you've received is legitimate, and we will be able to, I think, 9 out of 10 times convince you that you need to disengage and that the offer that you believe was real is far from the truth.
Hello, my name is Ryan Sothen, Outreach Coordinator within the Nebraska Attorney General's Office. As Outreach Coordinator, I have responsibility primarily for consumer education and community relations across Nebraska's 93 counties, with a special emphasis on protecting Nebraska's most vulnerable. Nowhere is that vulnerability greater than within the segment of the population defined as our senior population, which we will define as individuals age 60 plus. Though 19% of our population, seniors are 37% of all complaints to our office, and that's the good news. I say that because through other study data that is available to us, we know with certainty that the actual incurred rate of fraud is over 20 times greater than the reported rate, suggesting that we have a real problem with underreporting. But rather than focusing time and attention today on the popular frauds and scams, what we really want to focus on is preventative measures. And the number one fraud and scam here in Nebraska is identity theft. And you can do wonders for protecting yourself from the prevalence of this crime by taking advantage of the information that is available in our Identity Theft Repair Kit. Beginning on page 20, you will find valuable information on how you can take out, at little or no cost, no more than $9 total, a security freeze, otherwise known as a credit freeze, which will protect the release of your credit report from the identity thieves who will want to take out new lines of credit in your name. This is a written directive whereby you take complete control of your credit report, preventing its release and making the job of the criminal much more difficult. Again, additional information can be found on page 20 in our Identity Theft Repair Kit. Beyond that, we'd like you to take steps that are available to you for free to eliminate the junk calls and the junk mail that you are besieged by. To eliminate the junk calls, sign up for the National Do Not Call list, then contact your local telephone operating company and secure for yourself, again for free, calling features that simply need to be turned on. I'm talking specifically about anonymous call rejection and selective call rejection. Your telephone operating company will be able to give you more information. To stop the junk mail, we provide a brochure, again available to you online, entitled We Can Help. And therein you can sign up for the Direct Marketing Association's National Do Not Mail, which will stop all junk mail from coming to you at your home. Finally, we want to encourage all seniors to take advantage of the easy reporting that is available to you by contacting our office through our local telephone number or statewide toll-free number, or accessing our consumer website, which is protectthegoodlife.nebraska.gov. There you can report a fraud or scam and file a complaint or be sent the form so that you can manually submit via the U.S. mail your complaint to us. We will investigate and follow up with you, and thank you for your reporting.
Hi, my name is Ben Cruzy, and I work for the Nebraska Department of Health and Human Services as a supervisor with Adult Protective Services. And with me today is Cindy Koenig-Warnke, an investigator with the Lincoln Police Department. And we're here today to talk about financial exploitation of vulnerable adults and the elderly. And usually for our purposes, for both Cindy and I, the whole process starts with a call to our statewide hotline, which is a 24-hour hotline that takes all call reports about abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. And it's the same number that we use to make reports to about child abuse. The hotline screens those calls. And once they're screened, if they do meet a criteria, they're assigned to a local APS investigator. And in conjunction with law enforcement, often the allegations are investigated to see if financial exploitation of vulnerable adults has occurred. And law enforcement and adult protective services, as Cindy knows, we have kind of different roles. While we're both investigating, the end result of our investigation is a bit different. For Cindy's case, or any law enforcement case, obviously they're looking at the potential of bringing forth some criminal charge based on proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And for adult protective services, if we make a finding that abuse and neglect has occurred, the perpetrator of that would end up on our central registry. And so the purpose of that registry is so that we can keep track of people who have abused vulnerable adults in the past, to try and keep them out of jobs and positions where they might be working with vulnerable adults in the future. One other component that Adult Protective Services does that law enforcement does not do is that we can provide services to rectify instances of abuse, neglect, and financial exploitation. In financial exploitation cases, for example, what we might do to help rectify or make things safer is to help the person get a power of attorney or a payee or even a guardian conservator to prevent further loss of money. We might help the person secure their money in a more secure account or something like that. But our job is in part to provide services to help rectify the situation and ensure that the vulnerable adult is safe. All of this is done, like I said, in conjunction with law enforcement that oftentimes has a much more difficult job than us because, as I said, our burden of proof is based on a preponderance of evidence, and Cindy's or any law enforcement's burden of proof is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Did you want to talk about that, Cindy?
Sure. When law enforcement gets an investigation, sometimes they come from Adult Protective Services and we collaborate during the investigation. We can also get reports from concerned citizens, neighbors, friends, and family members regarding a possible financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. A vulnerable adult is defined as any person 18 or older that has a substantial mental or functional impairment in the state of Nebraska. Law enforcement will also investigate senior adult abuse, which is any adult age 65 or older, where Adult Protective Services will not investigate those allegations. Mm-hmm. Once law enforcement gets the allegation or complaint, either from Adult Protective Services or an individual, we start the investigation through interviews of victims, witnesses, and other individuals that are identified in the investigation. We also obtain financial records, medical records, and any other records that may assist us in the investigation. And also, if we identify that the individual or the older adult needs some resources, we would collaborate with Adult Protective Services or other agencies in the area to assist those individuals with the services they need that law enforcement may not be able to provide. Once we get an investigation, we work closely with prosecution to ensure that we have the evidence to pursue a criminal investigation that it meets the elements of a crime. Once we work with the prosecutor and we believe we have the evidence to meet the elements of a crime, we make an arrest. And then it's provided in the, once we make an arrest, then the individual is entered in the court system or the criminal justice system for prosecution. During the investigations, they can be very challenging as different things have been addressed or need addressed, such as an individual with cognitive impairment may have undiagnosed cognitive impairment and they may need formal testing. To provide that formal testing, we may need some court intervention, and we would work with other agencies, include Adult Protective Services, to obtain a guardian or conservator. To obtain a guardian or conservator, we would need to get an attorney or someone to assist us to petition the court and to protect that individual so their medical or financial well-being is secure.
And to clarify there, with the testing, you talked about the fact that testing would be needed to determine whether a person needed, say, a guardian or conservator versus just appointing their own power of attorney or someone else to just help them with their finances so that they're not losing money. And that would be an example of a service that Adult Protective Services can provide that law enforcement wouldn't. We can help arrange for neuropsychological testing or other testing and help pay for those things. Another interesting point that I wanted to talk about is how tough it can be for us to decide whether a person meets the statutory definition of a vulnerable adult. As I said, Adult Protective Services can only work with vulnerable adults. Law enforcement, of course, can work with any type of victim. But with a vulnerable adult, what we're looking at with that mental or physical impairment is simply we're looking at, does this person, for mental or physical reasons, need assistance from another person to meet their day-to-day needs? And that can take a lot of investigation, getting medical records to back up the fact that the person is a vulnerable adult, and also getting the financial records can be difficult and a time-consuming process.
Yes, and we also look at activities of daily living and what assistance the vulnerable adult or older adult may need, which includes bathing, dressing, meal preparation, driving, and so forth. And that information is all documented during our investigation of what kind of assistance, or if any assistance, is being provided to the victim, because that shows the evidence that the victim may be a vulnerable adult. When we need assistance to get protection for the vulnerable adult, it can be challenging because we may not find an individual who may be willing to serve to protect an individual, and so that's why we have to collaborate together to ensure the safety, either the physical safety or the financial safety of the vulnerable adult.
You brought up a really interesting point, Cindy. I've been with Adult Protective Services for over 10 years now, and I've seen that I really think the most common variable that we see for the people that actually are victims of financial exploitation, and I should say other forms of abuse and neglect, is isolation. You said it can be difficult to find someone able and willing to take over the case, and that's certainly the problem that Adult Protective Services often finds, is that the person we're dealing with, the financial exploitation or abuse or neglect or what have you, is really appears to be occurring largely because that person is isolated. Other people aren't seeing them, other people aren't aware of what's going on, and oftentimes people who are willing to take advantage of that situation feel emboldened by that isolation. I assume you see the same thing in law enforcement.
Yes, and we've worked cases where an individual or a perpetrator has isolated the victim so no one could get access to the victim to financially exploit the victim. And the victim is not getting the health care, the medical care, the mental health care needed, and the perpetrator is purposely isolating that individual to victimize them.
And what Adult Protective Services often does in our job is to call, we will oftentimes call all kinds of parties. We may start with one person, and we may have a number of people we can get names and numbers for. And that's part of what we do, is we try to draw together a team of people who can work together to help a vulnerable adult get out of a situation of abuse, neglect, or financial exploitation.
Law enforcement and Adult Protective Service collaborate to ensure the victim's safety and prosecution for the perpetrator of financial exploitation.
My name is Mary Christensen. I'm a geriatric nurse practitioner here in Lincoln. Dementia, by definition, is impaired reasoning. Along with a decline in cognition, there's also a decline in awareness. This applies not only to memory and decision making, but the ability to recognize social cues. Normally, we are able to respond to something that may be significant around us. The fight or flight instinct or intuition regarding a situation that may require caution may be diminished. A study at Cornell tested a group of older adults exposed to financial exploitation. They found that in this scam that some had recognized and avoided it, and others had been robbed in the scam. All were able to handle their own finances. They paid their own bills, they balanced their own checkbooks. They were pretty independent, but the group that had been scammed had changes in their brain, the anterior insula, which signals something important is happening in their environment. They were unable to read the social cues that would normally tell them that they might be in a risky situation. This impairment, along with one of the most prevalent symptoms of dementia, short-term memory loss, places them at a disadvantage simply by the times that they do remember. The 1940s, the 1950s. In those times, if someone called on the phone and told them that they were from the Benevolent Society of Firefighters, of course Mrs. Jones would believe that her money would be going directly to those local people. It would have been unthinkable that someone from across the country would be making that call and either scamming her or be a telemarketer that may or may not be giving a minuscule amount to their local group. While there is little that we can do to stop the progression of dementia, we can be better prepared for the risk of financial exploitation. Just as we have a medical power of attorney, a financial power of attorney is just as important prior to needing one in a financial crisis. By appointing a reliable and trustworthy financial power of attorney, we may not be able to eradicate financial exploitation of vulnerable populations, but we may be able to prevent many situations, including family exploitation, with early planning.
Hi, I'm Mary Wilson. I'm an attorney, and I've worked in the area of elder law for the past 37 years. If someone gives you power of attorney, names you as their attorney-in-fact or agent, it shows that they've placed a lot of trust in you. But it's important that you live up to the confidence they have in you. If you don't know what to do, you always need to do what's in the best interest of the person who's given you the power of attorney. Remember, even though the power of attorney can be used after it's signed immediately, it's important that you realize if the person is not incapacitated, that they're still in charge, that they get to make the final call on things. You may never be required to account for the actions that you've taken, but it's important to keep very good records. Keep checks, debit card receipts, bank statements, so that if you are asked to account, you'll be able to. Sometimes it's difficult to share information with other family members, but I will tell you that it raises a red flag as to what you're doing if you're not sharing that information with other members of the family. The power of attorney may or may not give you authority to make gifts, but if it does, keep in mind that the gifts should be similar to those that mom or dad gave before they became incapacitated. If they always gave the same amount to each of the children, then continue to do that. You're entitled to be compensated if you're serving as attorney in fact, but what you pay yourself should reflect the size of your estate that you're dealing with and the kind of things that you're doing. If there are two people serving as attorney in fact at the same time, you need to look at the document to find out if you can act independently of each other or if you should always do everything together. Sadly, if you do mishandle finances, you can be criminally prosecuted. You can be made to repay the money. When you sign as a power of attorney, it's important that you sign the person's name first, followed by B-Y, and then your name, but always remember to either add the words agent or POA after your name to make sure we realize you're not signing as an individual. If you ever have questions about whether or not you can or can't do something, don't hesitate to seek legal advice. It's much easier to stay out of trouble than to get in trouble and then try to get out. Try not to change the person who gave you the power of attorney's estate plan. For example, if they have CDs that are payable on death to various members of the family, don't spend first all the money that's under one person's power payable on death and then leave the others intact. The power of attorney ends when the person that gave it to you dies, and you cannot use it once they have died. You should also look in the document to see whether or not there are any kind of special instructions that you need to follow. If you follow these guidelines and seek legal advice when necessary, you should not have any problems serving as an attorney in fact.
Additional funding provided by AARP Nebraska and Nebraska Bankers Association.